Hello, everybody, and welcome to our webinar today, The Social Responsibilities of Universities in the Era of Migration. My name is Alison Morrisroe. I work at the European University Association, and I will be the chair of today's webinar. So we're very happy to have you here today. This is actually a part of the UNI Diversity Project's final event. It has been a widespread event, so we have had 3 different events, so a workshop in Barcelona on Wednesday, a documentary screening yesterday in Rome, and today this webinar. So the objectives of this webinar today is to present the outcomes of the project and to highlight the crucial role played by higher education institutions in fostering the social inclusion of migrants and cultural diversity. So we're so happy to have you all here with us today. Next slide, please. So before I hand you over to our first speaker, I just wanted to let you know a little bit about this webinar platform and how you can interact on it. So first of all, we have the chat. You'll see this on your right-hand side. And here is where you can greet everyone. So I would invite you to do that now. Please say hello. Tell us where you are from. If you have any technical issues, of course, please let us know in the chat as well. Or any other remarks, you can pop them in the chat. However, if you have a question for one of our speakers, please put this in the Q&A box. And please note that the questions actually have to be approved. So our communications team will be going through the questions and approving them as they come in. And once they are approved, they'll be under the approved list. There's also a function where the speakers can reply to your question in writing. So I would also invite the speakers, if you have a moment and you see that there is a question for you in the chat or in the Q&A, you can of course respond to it in writing. There is also a polls function on this webinar platform, but today we won't be using it, so there's no need to worry about that. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to our first speaker. So this is Graziella Gaglione from Sapienza University in Rome. And Graziella is going to tell us about the UNI Diversity Project. So the floor is yours, Graziella.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm speaking on behalf of Sapienza University of Rome, which has been coordinating the project UNI Diversity. Next slide, please. Just a few words on Sapienza. Sapienza is coordinating the UNI Diversity project after having been partner within the In Here project, which was funded by the European Commission within the previous Erasmus Plus program, and it was a strategic partnership. The main aim of the In Here project, which we can consider the father of the UNI Diversity one, was based mainly on the sharing of good practices among the partnering universities. The main outcomes of the project were a catalog of good practices. We realized a webinar series and guidelines for administrative staff. We also had a staff week together with many people coming from all over the world. And at the end of the project, we published also some recommendations. Next slide, please. The main aim of the In Here project was, of course, that of focusing on refugees and the impact of refugees on universities, and which was the answer of universities on this great challenge coming from welcoming and including refugees within the universities. Starting from In Here, we thought about creating a new project with making a step further, and we therefore submitted a proposal, which is the Diversity proposal, which was then funded by the National Agency. Also a strategic partnership within the Erasmus Plus program. And the UNI-Diversity project has widened the scope of the project in here, since it has started to focus more on the institutional strategic planning, how important it is to have the commitment of the governance to be successful and to have a sustainable approach to addressing all challenges coming from the refugees and also from the migrants, which are getting in touch with the universities, migrants with a difficult migration background, which is the second main news of the UNI-Diversity project, with if compared to the in here one. Next slide, please. The main outputs of the UNI-Diversity project is the analytical atlas, and we will go into details with the next in the next presentation. And the analytical atlas is in concrete the mapping and analysis of the approaches that the European higher education institutions have towards migration. Next slide, please. The second output is the UNI-Diversity awareness campaign, which is aimed at, of course, was aimed at encouraging the debate on all the issues and all the topics rising from the phenomenon of migration. Next slide, please. Within the awareness campaign, yesterday in the evening, we had the screening of the documentary Refugee students, and we had the participation of many people, also refugee students who came to the Cinema Farnese in Rome. Next slide, please. The third output, which will be detailed in the further presentations, is the Toolkit for university staff and services, which is a set of instruments that has been thought in order to support universities, in order to integrate issues related to migration and diversity in the different areas. So it's a very interesting toolkit. And the last but not least output is the strategic framework, which represents the methodological instrument to support the development and strengthening of higher education strategies and on inclusion, of course. Next slide, please. So these are my contacts, and if you are willing to know more about the projects or about everything we do within the refugees and migrants inclusion policies here at Sapienza, will be at your disposal. Thank you very much for your attention.
Right, thanks so much, Graziella, for the introduction. I think before we go into my presentation, Alison should probably be back on screen to see whether there's any questions. But if not, I can just continue. As Graziella anyway presented already some details about the outputs, I will be talking about one of them. There she is. Thank you, Alison.
Henriette,
do you want to add something?
No, I just wanted to thank Graziella, first of all, for her presentation. and just for setting the scene and telling us a little bit about the UNI Diversity Project. So as Graziella said, we'll be going through all of the outputs in today's webinar. And so Henriette Stoeber, who's a policy analyst at the European University Association, will be telling us about output 1, which is this Atlas of Inclusion. So I just wanted to invite any questions. So, please do put them in the Q&A box for Henriette during her presentation. So over to you, Henriette.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Alison. I see there's already a question in the Q&A, but it relates to one of the later outputs, and we shall leave it to that. I will very quickly try to introduce the first output of the project, which, as Graziella mentioned, really took an analysis of the situation. You see here on my slide a little bit of background, and a lot of it has already been mentioned. Graziella talked about the INIA project, where we came together with partners in a similar constellation, so Sapienza, Barcelona, EOA, UNIMED, and then also Campus France. And there we took a bit of a more hands-on approach about what universities are doing for refugee inclusion. And we did notice that a lot of the times the activities that are happening at universities for students and also staff with a refugee-like background are based on a project or driven by volunteers. And at the time when INIA was happening, there was very little links to university strategies. However, at the same time, we found that projects that had managed to get a link to university strategies and get the attention of their leadership were, of course, in the longer run, more sustainable and could also, be established with a long-term view. And at the same time, at EOA, one of the big topics that we are working on is diversity inclusion. We do this in the context of policy, so for instance, in the context of the Bologna process, but also in projects. And we did find in various occasions that, it's more and more high on the agenda of our universities to be diverse, to be inclusive. I put here at the very bottom of the slide here an example from the Invited project, where we surveyed universities that are having already diversity strategies in place. And as part of those diversity strategies, we actually found that 70% of those universities try to target students with a specific migrant background or a specific ethnic background. And so this is really the background to the research that we did for UNI Diversity. And as we will see on the next slide, next slide, please. Thank you. We took actually several different projects from EOA and elsewhere together and tried to identify universities that have a strategy that support refugees. You will receive those slides afterwards, and all the projects are listed here. I won't go through them. There's a hyperlink to them. You can have a look yourself. But as part of all those projects, we surveyed universities. So we basically filtered those out that are strategic, more or less about the topic, collected then 69 strategic documents from universities across the European higher education area. And in the end of the day, also interviewed 13 of them. And on the next slide, we see some of the findings. So looking at the strategic documents themselves, it was quite interesting and also important to underline that there's a very clear link to institutional values, to the third mission of universities, and that's how they describe, their general actions in the field of diversity and equity. Most often we saw broad catch-all strategies, so really talking about, putting everyone on par, giving the same opportunities to everyone. In very few cases, actually, we saw, for instance, strategies with a non-discrimination focus and other approaches. Now, this was with regards to general diversity and inclusion. Coming more specifically to inclusion of students with a refugee-like background, actually, in the strategic documents, they're featured mostly indirectly. So strategies might reference the dimension of ethnic background, or perhaps also fairly rarely actually religious background, but we only found 2 that explicitly mention the support of students with refugee-like background. And this has to do with many things, the strategic documents being short documents, hopefully, for instance, is one of them. But another one is actually a challenge also in supporting the target group over the strategic level, and that is has to do with the definition. seeing it from the strategic level of a university, in many countries, they are actually not allowed, legally speaking, to target refugees explicitly, because they cannot, collect information about the migration status of their students and staff, or the ethnic background of their students and staff. In some countries, it's of course much more strict than others. We did not see the same for the programs, the support programs. Here, of course, they are dedicated to refugee students, but then also here there are some limitations from the legal side. So in some countries, actually in most of the ones that we interviewed, unfortunately, a full refugee status was required to participate in, for instance, a bridging course, language training to access higher education. And in a few other countries, asylum seeker status was enough. You will see a couple of examples on the next slide, and I won't go into much detail here. First of all, examples with regards to implementation. So the strategy is actually laying the basis for implementing refugee activities at the university. First of all, a couple of examples of the leadership portfolios that would be responsible for carrying out those actions. A very mixed picture here. Some have, for instance, a vice rector office for equality and diversities. In others, the vice chancellor for global engagement would be in charge of this topic, diversity, inclusion, and refugees. And then you can see a very long list of coordination points, really diverse approaches, depending on how the university is structured, how they then support refugee students. Most commonly, there's a diversity office, but also we've got universities where the international office is in charge, or even one of them where the human resource office, interestingly, is in charge of supporting refugees overall and implementing actions under the strategy. Next slide. Our report features examples of support measures, of course, that are, born out of the strategy or linked to the strategy at least. We split them into direct support measures, such as language courses and the things that you see very often, consultation and counseling. And then also the part about changing the narrative around migration itself, where a few of the universities at least cooperate, for instance, with international organizations, where they do research on the topic of migration, offer cultural exchanges with their community, and so on and so forth. Next. Of course, we were especially interested in the challenges and recommendations from the interviewees. Obviously, limited funding is always a challenge. There was quite a lot of talk about the challenge of lack of monitoring due to this legal issue that I mentioned earlier on, whereby, if you run a support program, but then you cannot track the student throughout their studies, you don't actually know whether they are successful in the end or not, or whether your program works or not. Some also talked about issues around leadership support, trying to actually identify potential refugee students, and so on and so forth. In terms of recommendations, very often there was the hint towards the revision of administrative structures, admission criteria, more those formal kind of things. Universities very often also, based on their own experience, recommended to collaborate with other higher education institutions and also actors in the broader community, so local NGOs, employment offices, those that directly deal with potential students or students with a refugee-like background, and so on. And then my last slide would just give you an overview of the conclusions of the report. And again, I would like to invite you to have a look at the full thing. Of course, with our research, with the review of strategies and the interviews, we did again drive the point home that it is necessary to have institutional strategic links if you want to have a program that is sustainable in the long run, and that does not 100% rely on the volunteering of students and staff. But I perhaps would like to especially underline the last point, which came out of one of the interviews, and I'll read it out. It said that a change of narrative is recommended, acknowledging that diversity and inclusion are not merely a matter of the institution's third mission, but that they can contribute to the overall quality of higher education. And I think this is a point that is very important for us at EUA, and we do see this point in all of our work when it comes to refugee students or researchers at risk. Our universities are welcoming them, not just as a matter of solidarity, of course that plays a part, but also as a matter of gaining international talent, of driving internationalization at home, and overall to add to the talent pool of the university. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Henriette. That was really interesting. I have put the link to the report in the chat. It's on the project's webpage. I just have one follow-up question for you, Henriette, and that is, when analysing the diversity strategies, did you find that any of them were linked to European policies or initiatives?
Thanks, Alice. That's a very good question. Actually, it was kind of also linked on the challenges slide, where the lack of policy support, albeit it was with relation to the national level, was actually mentioned by several of the interviewees. Of course, this links to funding, but it also links to things like admission criteria, recognition procedures, and all those things. So no, actually, there's not many links to policy levels, as there's just not so much support from the policy level, be it from funding or from the policy and legal reform side. I think the only one that came up explicitly would be perhaps international, so not European, but broader international policy. Several of the strategies reference, of course, the Global Compact for Refugees and the targets that are set there for access to education in general and access to higher education. But much can be done in this area in general.
Okay, good to know. Yes. Okay, thank you so much, Henriette. So we're going to now hand the mic over to Cati Jerez from the University of Barcelona, where she's the head of the Refugee Support Program. So Cati is going to tell us about the next output, which is the Toolkit for universities. So Cati, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for your presentation. And yes, I'm going to talk about this integral toolkit to assess and support the integration and development of strategies and actions related to migration and diversity at higher education institutions, but the short name is the UNIDiversity Kit. Yeah, so this UNIDiversity Kit is, as you can see, a set of instruments to support university staff and services in their efforts, actually in your efforts, to integrate issues related to the migration and diversity in all the areas of the institution. And we are focusing specifically in the third mission of the university, the social responsibility. The UNIDiversity Kit wants to be a practical tool, something you can use, something you can adapt, something you can rethink and implement in your own institutions. And by institutions, we mean a section of the university, a university, or even a university alliance. Well, the toolkit is divided in these 5 sections. I'm going to explain each of the sections. I will start with this institutional maturity on diversity and inclusion self-assessment tool, and we call it the maturity test. So if we can go to this slide, please. Thank you very much. So this self-assessment tool has been validated during the staff week in Rome in May-June 2022, and provides a state-of-the-art of the institution's maturity level on migration. It is divided in 4 main areas. It's divided in the area of governance, staff, accessibility, and support services. Here you have a picture. I think you cannot identify exactly the questions. This is the area related, the section, sorry, related to the support services. So you have different sentences, and you can identify your level of agreement on the sentence. So you have to sign what is your level of agreement, and at the end of the grid, you have to count the numbers you have put on each of the squares, and there will be a final score. Depending on the score, you go to the self-assessment results, and you will be in one of the 5 possibilities. So in this result, you will find the different characteristics of the phase where your university, area, or alliance is, and a list of resources for improving, for upgrading, let's say, the the maturity level on diversity of your institution. As I said, it's very practical. There is a set of instructions, so you are not alone doing this scoring. And it is something very, very interesting for you to identify where your section university alliance is placed in terms of maturity. Can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. In the second section of the toolkit, we have this governance diagnostic tool. Even though we had an area or section for governance in the first tool, let's say, in the self-assessment, in the maturity test, we wanted to focus on governance because we have seen that governance is key related to the design and the implementation of policies and strategies on diversity. So this tool wants to go deep on governance, and the idea is to identify these main actions, fields, internal actors, and actions implemented. There are questions related as well to things related to, for example, unconscious biases that governance body members can have and haven't been identified before. So there are specific things that we can work on and that can allows us to move forward in the governance in terms of inclusion of diversity. Next slide, please. The third section of the toolkit is the one related to the guides. It's important to take into account that there are different stakeholders in the university at the internal level and also in the external level. So identify their needs, their expectations, challenges, and opportunities are important, if not necessary, to include in the design and implementation of policies and the strategies on migration and inclusion. For this reason, we have these guides divided in three subsections: the one related to the external stakeholders, the one related to the, let's say, main characters of these diversity policies that are migrants and refugee students and staff, and the third one, the one related to the internal stakeholders. So you will see here that I have included like a draw of the main information we have, the identification of the stakeholders, different characteristics, why it's important, and so on and so forth. And the fourth instrument inside the toolkit is this policy canvas. This is the final draw that you can introduce. I mean, this is the final instrument where you can find this support for the development of this strategic plan. This is a very clear systematic scheme when we can find the main aspects of a diversity and diversity policy. It means that there is the mission, the vision, the values, and we can find stakeholders, main public target, and different elements, benefits. Well, the different elements that are key in the policy canvas. All of these four tools are strategically linked with the strategic framework. So we have this linking. And then last but not least is the resource section, where we can find a list of internet links where we can find more information related to the topics of social responsibility, migration and inclusion, and so on. Thank you very much for your attention. And if there are, well, you can have here my contact details. And if there are questions, I will be happy to answer them.
Thank you very much, Cati. And as you said, yes, we will be looking at the strategic framework towards the end of the webinar. Thank you for this really comprehensive presentation of all the different parts of the toolkit. I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how you tested this toolkit. I know it was tested, for example, in a workshop. And did you encounter any challenges while testing the toolkit? And if so, how are these challenges addressed in this final product?
Yeah, in Rome, for example, we tested the toolkit. Specifically, we tested the maturity level tool, and it was, well, we had a pre-test in Barcelona with colleagues from the university. So in Rome, what we did was a second pre-test. There were different things predefined by beforehand. And the main challenge was to adapt somehow the toolkit to a section, area, faculty, the whole university, and alliances. So we need to provide a tool that can be adaptable. So this was the main challenge, but I think we have overcome successful this challenge. Well, the audience will can test it again, but I think we have been successful.
Thank you very much, Cati. Yes. Okay, so without further ado, we are now going to hand the floor over to Lina Senen, who is from the University of Utrecht, where she works at the Diversity Lab. We asked Lina Senen to join today because her university diversity strategy and refugee program was actually included in the Atlas of Inclusion that was presented at the beginning of the webinar. So it's really great to have this case study presented during this webinar. So I'll ask Lina to join the floor and for her presentation to be put up, please.
Thank you, Alison. I think you can hear me now.
Yes, Lina, I think you're coming on. I can hear you anyway.
Takes some time, but
you're arriving.
I'm arriving indeed. Well, I can see myself already, but not my slides yet. But just as an introduction, indeed, my name is Lina Senen, and I work at Utrecht University within the Netherlands. And I'm involved in the refugee program called Inclusion with 2 U's. It's as a reference to Utrecht University. And if we can go to the next slide, before I tell you more about the program and what we do specifically, I first want to explain shortly how the program is incorporated within the university. So first there was the task force diversity at the university, but this was later formalized in the EDI program, which runs from 2021 until the end of 2024. And the AD program is based at a central administration level within the university, and it collaborates with all the faculties on different themes related to equality, diversity, and inclusion. And Inclusion, the refugee program, was originally a volunteer-based program, but now it falls under the umbrella of the AD program. But in contrast to the AD program, the finances of the inclusion program are not fully covered by the university. So we therefore also receive donations through our university funds and an annual subsidy from our municipality, which is the municipality of Utrecht. And depending on what is needed, we also try to find other subsidies from different foundations. And so if we can go to the next slide, we can look at the university strategic plan and the EDI strategy, because the university is trying to work towards being an accessible and inclusive university, which in turn will lead to a diverse student and staff population. And also the goal of the EDI program is to make everyone feel welcome and valued within the university. So the UU believes also that a diverse student and staff population will enrich our education and research because of all different perspectives come together and skills and knowledge. And this will also, what is it that you bring to the table? And the table now is the university. And this is also what inclusion, so the refugee program, stands for. It's and what we are trying to achieve. There is also a link in the slides to a video where different teachers and students of the university speak about the value of the inclusion program. I can put it in the chat later. So if we can go to the next slides. Inclusion is actually based on two different pillars. So on first part of our program, we focused on refugee students. Those are asylum seekers and status holders. And we offer them, actually a chance to further develop themselves by attending bachelor courses at the university. So these are courses that already exist within the university, and they can attend it for free. And below there is a little graph, and you see that when we started in 2016, there were some students who joined. There was a pilot, but you can see that over the years, many students have been involved in the inclusion program. And the numbers of 2022 aren't final yet, but also now there are more than 200 students who were involved in a bachelor course. And in addition to this, in a second pillar, we also focus on specifically status holders, and we offer them a traineeship to gain work experience within the university, to improve also their Dutch and expand their network through the traineeship program. If we can go to the next slide. This is about how we support our students, so who are following the bachelor courses. We are a team of 5 people, and 3 of them are focusing specifically on the inclusion students. So we created a 2-day preparatory training called Restart, which is actually a deep dive into Dutch culture and the university. What kind of values are there? What are the unspoken rules? This is all being handled within those 2 days of training. Amongst others, we also talk about expectations from teachers and how to collaborate with fellow students. We offer a library training about how to search for literature. The team are also setting up check-in meetings, so students can also come to inclusion to if there's something going on or to ask questions. We also have a buddy program in which an inclusion student is matched with 1 or 2 buddies, if they want to, of course. And these buddies are Dutch or international regular students at the university who are volunteering to help inclusion students. And this is by providing them a social network and help with practical matters. We also help out with travel costs and books. This is also mainly done from our donations. And if needed, we can also help with, lending them a laptop. And this is often an old one from the IT department. And then if you go to the next slide, this is a little bit more about the traineeship program. And I'm project leader of this specific pillar. So we offer the traineeships to several refugees. These are like a group of 10 trainees in this case, and they can follow a traineeship within different departments within the university. So we match the traineeship based on their background and education and their motivation. And within the traineeship, they can develop their skills in the field of work and increase their experience within the Dutch labor market. It's also an opportunity to expand the network. And we offer different trainings and private Dutch courses with a language coach. And there's also a budget for professional development. So we cooperate with the municipalities in which trainees are living. So trainees can keep their social benefits while they're doing this traineeship for 6 to 8 months. And we wanted this traineeship to be like a stepping stone to a paid job. And this can either be within or outside of the university. The traineeship program is paid by HR, and this is based on an annual decision. So every year we have to evaluate if we can continue with this program. If you can go to the next slide, this is a little bit about our typical inclusion trainee. So they already have their status, they are living in social housing, they speak Dutch on an intermediate level, and they have trouble finding a job, and especially in their own field. It's also according to the Central Bureau of Statistics in the Netherlands, nearly 60% of all status holders are still unemployed after 5 years. And especially among highly educated status holders, it appears that if they find a job, it is mostly below their level and a part-time contract. So that's why the traineeship program as a stepping stone is a very good opportunity. And finally, if you can go to the next slide, some results. So we started in 2021 with 5 trainees. They finished it, 4 found a job and 1 started with a master's. And this year, 11 trainees joined the program. 2 are still doing their traineeship and 9 finished and 8 found a job. Currently, we are matching the trainees for 2023. We received over 80 applications, so it's quite a big deal. And it's a whole process, but very interesting. Well, thank you so much for your attention. On this slide, there are some contact details. So if you have any questions, also feel free to reach out. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lina. It was really nice to hear about a concrete example of what universities are doing. Yes, really interesting to see that you have this link between your diversity strategy, equality, and diversity and inclusion strategy, and refugees, and the emphasis that you place on values as being so important. So thank you for that. So I'm just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how the program is supported maybe by the government or on a national level, or are you doing this all on your own?
Yeah, good question indeed. So indeed, we are receiving some donations for funding, but we also have the buddy program. I explained this very briefly, and this is sponsored by the NPO, which is like the National Education Program. And this is a program from the government meant to support educational institutions, especially with regard to recovering post-COVID. So it was a program set up during COVID times. So, for instance, the program focuses on students' community and well-being, which is also, of course, what the buddy program stands for. We are also in touch with other similar refugee programs of different universities. So we're talking to universities in Wageningen, Leiden, Eindhoven, different places within the Netherlands. And currently, we're also talking about with University in Amsterdam and Groningen about setting up a similar program, because indeed the formula of inclusion is very good, and it will be wonderful if more universities can apply this. So we want to share this knowledge and expertise, and especially because the students and also trainees, they are living in all over the place in the Netherlands, because they're linked to an AZC, an asylum seeker center. So they don't have the choice to choose to live, for example, in Utrecht. So it would be wonderful if more universities can adapt a similar program.
Yeah, a nationwide program, or
Exactly.
or a program being adopted across the nation. Yeah, thank you so much, Lina, for your presentation. So I'm now going to move over to Cristina Giudici from Sapienza University as well, where she's an associate professor. So she's going to tell us now about the strategic framework, which is indeed linked to the toolkit. And just to let you know, the toolkit will be available actually next week online. I saw a question about that in the chat. So Cristina, I'll invite you to the floor, and if we could put your presentation up as well.
Thank you. So, well, as you mentioned, we present today the main contents of the strategy framework, and we can go to the first slide, the second slide. Okay, thank you. So here we see just the first page, but the document will be soon available on the Unidiversity website. So just to introduce it, the strategic framework is a methodological instrument that comes from the experience realized during the project. It draws its contents on one hand from the Atlas of Inclusion that was realized by EWA, and on the other hand from the Toolkit realized by the University of Barcelona, and it is enriched by lessons learned during the project. Basically, the strategic framework wants to be a short and easy to read document aiming to support the university leaders in their effort to further develop and strengthen the strategy for inclusion of their higher education institutions. The document focuses on 5 key dimensions that need to be considered in building an inclusive strategy in relation to the migration phenomenon. We can go to the next slide, where the 5 dimensions are presented. We have the political dimension, the administrative dimension, financial, social dimension, and a transversal dimension that is that of awareness. Okay, it is important to stress that within each dimension, universities can play a role at 3 different steps of the student pathway. First, by helping migrants in refugee-like situation to access university. Second, by improving their successful participation during the university life. And third, by accompanying them to enter the job market. Okay, with this in mind, let me pass to look at each dimension. We can go to the next slide. The first dimension that we consider crucial for the development of a strategy of inclusion is the political one. It refers to the mission and values of the institution, and it is extremely important because the commitment of the scientific community is a precondition for ensuring the sustainability of the diversity strategy in the long term. And this dimension, as the other dimensions, is implicit in both the Atlas and the Toolkit, and the strategic framework link to these 2 documents, to the contents of these 2 documents that are related to the specific dimension, in this case, the political one. So in other words, on one hand, several examples have been identified by EWA of universities that consider inclusiveness as a strategic priority with reference to different categories of students, but as Henriette mentioned, there are some universities that also make explicit reference to migrants in refugee-like situation in their central level documents. Okay, on the other hand, for those universities who wants to strengthen the political aspect of their inclusion strategy, the strategic framework links to the specific tools in the toolkit. Just as an example, the toolkit helps to identify the mission and values of the organization with the policy canvas, help to frame migration and diversity in the mission and value of the organization with the governance diagnostic tool, also help to evaluate the situation of an institution in relation to migration-related issue with the maturity, institutional maturity tool, and finally help to find a new way to improve diversity and inclusion thanks to the interview and focus group guide. So this is just an example to see how these dimensions have emerged from both the toolkit and the atlas. The same is true for the other dimensions. I will go through them quickly because of time constraint, but we can come back more in detail if you want. We can go so quickly through the next 3 slides. So the second dimension is the administrative one. It refers to the internal organization of the university in terms of availability of offices dedicated to the diversity management or to provision of services. And here as well, several field practices and suggestions can be found in both the Atlas and the Toolkit concerning the three fundamental steps of access, participation, and transition to work. The next slide refers to the third dimension, that concern the financial resources in terms of both allocation and adequacy of the budget. And the next dimension in the next slide concern the social aspects, and it is referred at the same time to the capacity of the university to improve the relationship with other institutions, to the external world, and to foster inclusion within the academic population. So the next slide refers to the dimension that I think it's perhaps the most important, that is the dimension of awareness. It refers to the ability to perceive, to feel, to be conscious of the perceived and real situation of the institution with respect to migration-related issue. Is a transversal dimension. Awareness would concern mission and values, services that are provided, administrative organization, adequacy of the budget, and so on. And the toolkit as a whole is conceived to raise awareness about the perceived and real positioning of the university regarding migration and inclusion. So it's really in its wall. So to conclude, what I want to say is that the strategic framework wants to be a document that synthesizes the lesson learned during the project and wants to operate as a bridge between the two outputs. On one hand, the atlas, and the other hand, the toolkit. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you, Cristina, and thank you for highlighting this link between the strategic framework and the toolkit. Just one very quick question here. If you could provide universities with one piece of advice if they want to use this strategic framework, what advice would you give them?
Well, thank you for this question. So first of all, I want to stress the fact that the strategic framework is a short document, so it is possible to read it in a very short time. It is the first advantage of this document, and that it includes, as I said, the link both to the atlas and the toolkit. So it allows to navigate from one document to another. But if I can give a practical suggestion, I think that it's important to start from the awareness dimension, because it is important that institutions become aware, first of all, of its strength, of its weaknesses, aware of what are the challenges that it has to face, what are the opportunities, aware about the reality of its situation concerning the migration issue. So, okay, this is my first suggestion.
Thank you, Cristina. Okay, so start with the dimension on awareness. Yeah, noted. Okay, thank you so much. We are now going to invite Martina to the floor, who is from the UNIMED organization. And she is going to tell us about this documentary that was screened in Rome yesterday. And this is also one of the project's outputs. So Martina, can I invite you to the floor, please?
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Martina Zipoli, and I work for UNIMED. UNIMED is the Mediterranean Association of Universities, which counts today 150 universities from 24 countries, from both Europe and South Mediterranean countries. And we work to facilitate Euro-Mediterranean cooperation. So we have had an interest and a focus on working on migration-related issue since several years. We were indeed the coordinators of the HINIR project and now partners in the Unidiversity Consortium. We in Unidiversity, we have been in charge for the output 2, which was an awareness campaign. So we worked as responsible for deploying a campaign to draw the attention on the role that higher education institutions can play when it comes to inclusion of migrants and refugees. Part of the campaign was on social media, and as a part of this overall goal of raising awareness on the role of universities, we have developed a documentary which is titled Refugee Girls. The documentary was indeed screened for the very first time yesterday evening in Rome, with a very nice and successful events. We had more than 70 people in the audience, and we had the 3 girls, which are the main characters of the documentary, in the hall with us. So the documentary tells the story of one girl from Afghanistan, which is studying at the university, at Sapienza University in Rome, and the story of 2 Ukrainian girls, which are now studying at the University of Barcelona. And we would like to take this chance to show you the trailer of the documentary.
من در سال 2000 به دنیا آمدیم و در سالهای اول زندگیم به کلاً حادثات اتفاق افتاد که کلاً زندگیم تغییر کرد.
This just in, you are looking at obviously a very disturbing live shot there.
دو طیاره آمدن و توین تاورز نیویورک را از بین بردن و دفعتاً عاجل امریکاها آمدن به کشور ما و شروع به جنگ با طالبان کردن.
Я відчула себе зрадником. Я хотіла залишитися. І якби потребувало б, я навіть боролася за свою країну. Але я розумію, що краще мені залишитися тут зараз. Я б з задоволенням повернулася додому, до своєї кімнати, до нормального життя. Згадки до війни не завжди залишаться для мене моїм безпечним місцем, де я можу сховатися в важкі години.
You are here because you are interested in following your studies at the university, and we have this transition course to the university that aims to provide students of Spanish and Catalan knowledge, because these are the languages that we are.
Venire qui, grazie a Mentorship, grazie a questo progetto e grazie per tutto.
Grazie a te Robina, per noi è stata una grande ricchezza conoscerti, sei stata bravissima, stai avendo dei risultati ottimi.
Grazie a te professoressa, tutto.
Davvero brava.
Перший день в Іспанії був неймовірно для мене складним. Я хотіла повернутися додому. Я хотіла бути вдома. Я хотіла, щоб все повернулося назад. Я не могла витримати цього тиску своїх думок, які я мала. І постійно це відчуття, неначе твоє горло стискається. Ти не хочеш їсти, ти не хочеш спати.
زندگی لفظ زیباست و شنیدن، مگر عمرست در درج و رنج زیستن. مشکلات مانند پروانه دچار در رافت پرواز کنند. گاهی یکی را در دست گیری دیگرش ز دست رود.
Thank you so much for sharing the trailer with us, Martina. And I'm really glad that the screening went so well in Rome. And no doubt there will be more screenings of the documentary in the new year so that more people can watch the full thing. So a great success. Well done. So it is now 11:02. So we're going to wrap up today's webinar. So first of all, thank you to everyone for attending. I hope that you enjoyed the webinar and that you will explore some of the project's outputs in more detail. All the outputs that are available already are on the project's webpage, and those that will be shortly made available will also be on the project's webpage very soon. I would like to thank all of our speakers today for attending and for your presentations. Of course, the presentations will be shared with you, as will a recording of the webinar. So we would be very grateful if you could take just a few moments to fill in an evaluation survey, and the link will be put in the chat. So I think it should be coming very shortly. There you go. So if you click on the evaluation survey link, please complete it, and this will help us, improve our future events and let us know how we did today. So a big thank you to everyone again, and we wish you all a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.